Another draft physics presentation. Yes, Ken Wheeler videos. Yay. No, not really. Um, it's kind of quite discouraging because his videos, he got the YouTube whatever play button thing, and some of his videos are getting tens of thousands of views now, and this is just such garbage. Even any kind of logical analysis, it's so bad. It's worse than truther nonsense, because at least they now and then cite some sort of real statistic or something, a real scientific experiment of some kind. And the ones he does, the experiments he does, are all horribly flawed. His experiments are just rubbish, and that's all they got. He doesn't cite anything else in the real world as any kind of evidence for this ether theory. That's it doesn't have any dimensions. It doesn't have any. He doesn't describe it in any rational way, any kind of way you can imagine or cognize in any way whatsoever. This non-materialism he believes in. So anyway, just play some of this. So this video was just incredibly stupid. So it's this old copper pipe magnet thing, right? And this has already been theoretically understood for a long time. All that's happening is as the magnet falls, it's creating a temporary magnetism in the copper, because copper is paramagnetic or whatever, that it can't hold a magnet. It doesn't necessarily hold a magnetic influence, but it will become magnetic in the influence of a magnet. But it's not a very strong magnetism, and it's not it's strong enough in the sense you can make electric magnets out of copper wire. But regardless, it's not a permanent condition. And so it's just two opposing magnetic fields, and so obviously the magnet drops slower because it's pushing the fields. The two fields are pushing against each other. And so he's trying to turn this into some sort of gravity experiment, and it's just the experiment is so fundamentally flawed because he doesn't measure the weight of the magnet to start with in any kind of consistent manner. So he has found that the center of his scale, if he puts the magnet in the center of the scale, he gets the wrong reading for the magnet's weight. He gets a different reading than if he puts the magnet on the outside of the scale. And so right there you should understand, well, I have to find some other way to measure the magnet than to put it on top of the scale, quite obviously, because he gets two completely different readings a few inches away from each other. So it's just such an obvious flaw in the experiment. I mean, you can't sit there and claim here's a phenomenon and it's based on just a completely flawed experiment. So anyway, here I'll let it play with some of this. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. It's just this issue of the feedback problem now is being created because the speakers are going into the microphone and that kind of bullshit, and because I have to change the sync of the microphone to match the video, then the speakers are in the wrong sync with anyway, so that's where the echo is now coming from. So I'm trying a different strategy because I really don't want to wear headphones to make a video.
Raises by an ounce, and when it hits, it'll gain its additional ½ ounce.
There, so when the magnet goes to the base, it gains another ½ ounce. Now watch this part and you'll understand exactly where that extra ½ ounce comes from.
Basically. Okay. Since there is no contact...
So, look at the weight of the magnet. 2.0 when the magnet's towards the center. When it's right in the center, it's even worse.
Between the copper pipe and the neodymium iron boron.
2.0. That's the weight of the magnet there. And now he's going to move the magnet to another location and say, see, this is the weight of the magnet. I mean, it's just so frickin' stupid.
It only shows 2 ounces right now because it's very close to the center where there's ferromagnetic acceleration, or what the common human being calls magnetic attraction.
Yeah, so there, he says the real weight is 1.2, but that's not where you're going to put the copper pipe, and the magnet's going to go down in the middle where it gets the wrong reading. You're not putting the copper pipe where the magnet is now. You're putting the copper pipe in the middle, and that's where the magnet's going to hit, is the middle, where it gets the wrong reading. So anyway, so enough of this. So the whole the context of this video is somehow he's demonstrating something. He doesn't believe in Lenz's law or eddy currents, and I don't care whether you call it a law, or I don't care whether you call them eddy currents, or the fact that a magnet magnetizes materials it comes in contact with. I mean, quite obviously a magnet will cause magnetism to arise in steel. You know, put the metal iron, you put it close to the magnet, it becomes magnetic because the magnetism is arranging the atoms inside the material. And some of that can be, like in the case of iron, you can transfer magnetism in the sense that you can cause the steel to become magnetic. You're not really transferring anything. Just because of the magnetic force, you're rearranging the atoms, and so now the atoms are all pointing proton up, electron down, or vice versa, but you're just changing the domains of the atoms. I mean, this is clearly understood and known physics, and for him to pretend you can't apply those simple principles. I mean, he basically said if you say Lenz's law or you say eddy currents, he's going to delete your comment. Why? Because those sciences aren't rock solid? No, of course they are. It's just well, anyway, he's so obnoxious. So next piece of crap was a video, but you know, the ratings on these videos are 10 to 1, you know, positive, and this is just such bad physics. It's just so depressing. Alright, so this video is just one of his typical rants, so I'll just go through it. You know, that's all you can do, right? So he claims to understand the history of the invention of the word photon, and who cares? I mean, I could go back and I could say who invented the word perturbation, and I could probably figure out that he was a real wanker, you know. You know, and so therefore the word perturbation should never be used because a wanker, you know, said it first. I mean, it's just stupid.
Keep it simplex and yet it not be a simple topic. Simple versus simplex, right? The notion of a photon. By the way, there's a neat article that I have. I have the link to it somewhere. I know I can find it. Anyway, charting off the occurrence of the usage of photon. In it, of course, I know photos is an ancient Greek word. Let's not get into that. That was a different denotation and connotation.
No, I really don't think it was. I think they were talking about light. So the word has a root that makes sense. So even if the guy who used the word photon was a lunatic, he clearly associated it properly with an ancient word. So you're just talking shit anyway. But again, this whole idea that I'm going to defeat the idea, the concept of a ray of light, by making fun of the parents of the word photon. You know, I mean, that it's just that bad. It's like me saying you're dumb because I have a video of your mother, you know, scratching her vagina in public. So therefore you're you know, a little mutant because your mother's a retard. You know, it's not a good argument, Ken. It's really, really lame. But again, it works on his imbecile audience. Ugh, disgusting.
Hardcore materialistic atomism. There's no such thing as a damn light part.
Okay, so hardcore materialistic atomist. So again, he doesn't believe in atoms. He doesn't believe in electrons, protons. He doesn't believe, apparently, in this understanding of the difference between matter and force. And there's forces. And again, conventional physics has made a ton of errors, so there's lots to pick at. I'm not denying that. But his alternative theory is even worse. I mean, their theory's nonsense, but his is just double nonsense, or nonsense squared. I mean, it's nonsense squared to just blame this vacuous notion of some ether thing, okay, that is responsible for everything. It's like some kind of Henry Potter thing, you know. Just, but let's all get our magic ether wand and perturbation zappio, you know. Hyperberlio, you know, screwio. What? That's not physics. It's complete bullshit. he talks about nature not being some kind of bitch who lives in penthouses, and yet he's giving nature this huge infrastructure of this ether that somehow knows how to create these different perturbations that are not substance, they're not real, but somehow they can impose energy. But they're only imposing energy on other non-real things. I mean, it's just so frickin' stupid, because even if I conceded the point, let's make everything out of Magic Sparky, there's a smallest amount of Magic Sparky, and then there's big blobs of Magic Sparky, and we know those dynamics, that little blob of Sparky hits big blob of Sparky, big blob of Sparky can only do a little tiny bit of energetic response. A little thing, a little happening happens, not a big happening. You need chain reactions for anything big to happen, like in a nuclear bomb or something. We know it causes those things, and so what's the difference whether you make it out of jello or you make it out of pudding? Who cares? Ugh, this is stupid. Anyway. Well, now what happened? Oh, I hit the mute.
Just like an enormous stream of atomic... And then we get into wave-particle duality and Einstein's insanity. Anyway, Gilbert and Lewis coined the term photon for the smallest unit of radiant energy. And he said it would seem...
Yeah, and he keeps quoting Einstein in this German voice. It's, Nazi kind of voice. And it's just like, it's just so stupid. I mean, Einstein fled the Nazis. I mean, I don't know. Just keep being retarded, Ken.
This is a halfway decent part. It would seem inappropriate to speak of these hypothetical, you see, he himself called a photon a hypothetical entity. As a particle hour later he did. Seem inappropriate to speak of one of these hypothetical entities as a particle of light, or a light quanta, or a light quant, if we are to assume that it spends only a minute fraction of its existence as a carrier of radiant energy. Then we actually get into the moron Einstein, who actually adopted Gilbert and Lewis's idea of the photon. It's like, that is a good idea for, the quantum. Because all of quantum, by the way, quantum, quantity. Do you know what quantity is? Quantity refers to mass and things countable. When you say quantity, what you're referring to is something that you can count. And all of these nut jobs.
Yeah, something that has a discrete quality that's definable. And, all these, there's a ton of experiments that have sort of described photons, at least at minimum we kind of know they're not made of some fluid or something where a little bit of it can spill in and then a little bit more and a little bit more, that they hit something as all or nothing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of experiments that kind of confirm that's the way it works. Yeah, a lot of them are dependent on the fact that an electron has to be moved by the photon, so there's a minimum amount of energy that has to go in for us to see anything. But I'm just saying that based on sophisticated analysis, in the sense that the event of the electron moving happens very soon or very early in an experiment, kind of means that it didn't take time for the photon to do its business. It all happened really fast, really quickly, and all at once.
In quantum mechanics, and I have nothing against math or mathematicians, but you see, Mother Nature is like a hairy armpit chick with muddy feet and a hemp skirt, and she doesn't have a calculator, and she doesn't count crap, because the entire universe doesn't work off.
Right, but she does perturbatia, supernosa. She does a bunch of magic wand tricks. I mean, fuck this. She has every appearance of being Tinkerbell. So, by your description.
Off math. It works off force and motion, inertia and acceleration, centrifugal divergence, centripetal convergence. Everything is capacitance, resistance, permeability, and permittivity.
Right. A capacitance of what? Collection of what? Capacitance is holding something. So, yeah, okay. What? Resistance, how? Resistance to nothing? How does this resistance take shape? How does something create resistance to this ether thing, this counter space, this inertia thing? How does it not inertia? Uninertia.
Magnetic permeability and dielectric permittivity. This is what
Again, just more rubbish talk that still doesn't explain why when I turn magnets one way they repel, when I turn them another way they attract. no explanation of what causes them to move.
Einstein said. He called it das Lichtwand, and I forget what's the exact quote from the idiot Einstein. Here we go, here's the idiot Einstein. On the way of particle duality, it seems as though we must use sometimes one theory and sometimes the other. When at times we must use...
Right, so this is, he can't make an argument, and he can't have a civil argument. He never will allow anybody to challenge him. I mean, he could do interviews with people who disagree with him and explain it to them, explain where they got it wrong, or do something constructive, but he's too big a coward to do that. And these sycophants just fall for this just absolute rubbish. Yes, Einstein said some things, like every scientist or every famous person in history has said some things that they probably would like to take back. And I'm pretty sure Einstein, the quote he's quoting is actually Einstein trying to mend fences with as quantum mechanics surpassed him, decided to ignore him. He was essentially mending fences by saying, yes, I'll play along, okay, with this duality notion, I'll accept your wave, blah, 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 but let's do physics, okay? So he was just conceding that, yes, the experiments indicate two truths that are in conflict.
Meaning the wave and the particle. We are faced with a new kind of difficulty. When Einstein said difficulty, and by the way, when I call Einstein an idiot, I'm actually agreeing with Tesla. There are many quotes of Nikola Tesla who called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot.
Right, and Tesla was a twitchy, mustached, lazy doof-off. So there, where big victory, a name calling. Yeah, bravo, asshole. Useless mush.
To fill in the gaps, and this is what mathematicians are really good at. We have two contradictory pictures of reality. You see, here's another issue said from the lips of this knuckle-dragging moron Einstein. There's nothing.
Right. So there is something contradictory in the evidence. So he's conceding it's contradictory, but again, the problem is it works as a factual matter. There is a property that these particles have that appear to be wave-like. Now, I would argue that's just appearance, and if they thought a little better, they could have figured that out.
Contradictory in Mother Nature. Contradictory by he means duality. Wave-particle duality? Well, a wave is not a thing. A wave is what something does. And light is certainly not a particle. The notion that light is a particle is an arbitrary creation, invented to appease the stupidity.
So again, it's just this idea that light is a particle is arbitrary is just nonsense. Even Newton's experiments. Everybody's attempted to do experiments to quantify what light is. And the fact is that it does function in this very quantitative way. And you're just denying every experiment using photons. Why don't you show the experiment that illustrates how that photons don't come in clumps? Why don't you do that? Why don't you show the experiment where there's no clump of photon? Show it.
Of mathematicians, these mathematicians who are, by definition, the founders of quantum physics. Here's two interesting words. Physics, meaning physical. Fields are not physical, for crying out loud. Quantum.
Oh, and ether is. The counter space, the lack of inertia. Those things are somehow physical. Those things make any physical sense. You're the asshole saying there's no materialism. There's no atoms. There's no... and then yet he'll sit there and talk about how a field isn't physical, when everything he wants to pretend the universe is little sparky stuff on the end of some, perturbatia, hyperborea, fucking wand.
Meaning quantity, meaning you can count it, but you can't count a field because a field is not a particle. You can't count a field.
Well, again, the fact that their physics uses words like fields to describe the mechanism that transfers energy, yeah, that's their mistake. But the fact that there's energy moving between two things is demonstrated by experiments.
The four Maxwellian field equations only define a field as a change over a period of time with a resultant effect. But a field has never been defined by any branch of science. None, ever.
And right, and either as ether. So again, you've defined nothing. You just claimed the existence of this stuff that somehow converts what we understand to be real energy into some sort of thing in the ether that's again arrives at the other place and is now a real thing again, or something different than just ether perturbation. So, and where does this ether begin and where does it end? So we're made out of ether. Where's the non-ether? Where's the space to the counter space? What defines the difference between a something and a nothing, a perturbation and no perturbation? What's the difference?
A field, by the way, is an inertia or ether perturbation, or a modality thereof.
So it's an ether and inertia perturbation. So again, a field is a thing moving, and it has to move. He says it doesn't move because he thinks waves are standing or something, but clearly water waves move, the force moves. Photons go from point A to point B, they obviously move. It just doesn't make any sense. It's so incoherent.
Of an inertia or ether perturbation. Because I know you're going to say, well, what is a field? It's an inertia perturbation. Two contradictions.
So I mean, the field is now an inertia perturbation. So there's ether and stuff perturbates through it, but the ether isn't a field, just the perturbation is a field. You see, this isn't coherent.
Like a fat elephant. So it is the bird-elephant duality. Sometimes this invisible creature, we know it flies.
Right, so this is just a case of somebody else makes a mistake, and so then you make yourself a hero because they're wrong, and somehow you're right because they're wrong. Well, because they're wrong doesn't mean you're right, and so you actually have to prove or demonstrate with evidence why you're right. Just claiming you're right without demonstrating you're right doesn't mean anything. Me saying conventional physics is wrong and providing no evidence of an alternative theory is nonsense. I'm providing evidence. What's your evidence? Give me a drawing of this what causes the whatever, the material thing, the magnet, the whatever it is, to move towards each other or to repel each other. He has no explanation for why that happens.
And sometimes it walks along the ground, gives big footprints. Invisible creature, right? In this case, we're talking about light. Duality, difficulty, contradictory. These are the words of the idiot Einstein in reference to light. Well, that's not what light is. See, this is what Einstein...
So Einstein concedes using real words, explaining it's a difficulty, a conflict, a problem, blah, 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 and he pretends that somehow Einstein said, yes, duality is the greatest thing that ever happened to physics. No.
Well, they call it das Lichtquant, a light quantity. Mathematicians and all of these a-holes, and they are absolutely all of them a-holes of the highest order, let me assure you, there's nothing wrong with being a mathematician. There's absolutely nothing wrong with math. But when you actually have idiots that only know how to count something, then they will quantify it.
Whatever. Theory behind the math is what the argument is. The math, the ability to go plus, minus, and equals is fine. Square root of this, that's great. But yeah, it doesn't mean anything if your theory behind how you put the variables into the equation is wrong, then your math is wrong.
Oh my God! There's where the word quantum came from. They have to quantify it because they can't count it unless they can quantify it. But you see, a field, whether that be light, magnetism, dielectricity, they are not quantifiable. A field has no quantity. Sure, it involves an area. We know the influence given certain...
So again, he's making these two words synonymous with somehow his theory. He says a field is just the individual perturbations. So he's agreeing with me essentially that it's a field of perturbations. It's a field of bullets moving. So he's conceding the point that there is no field. There's just the perturbations, which is essentially the same thing as saying the bullets. What's the difference between this linear, longitudinal pulse perturbation, as he calls it? What's the difference between a longitudinal pulse perturbation and a bullet? Oh, that's right, not much at all.
Cartesian coordinates over a certain period of... No. Four Maxwellian field equations never define a field, nor do they ever quantize a field. They do...
So again, he's complaining about Maxwell's equation. Maxwell was an ether nut, and he's complaining. It's just amazing. The ether nut, sort of tries to unify magnetism and electricity in four equations explaining how the force is transferred between these things, and he does a fairly good job of it, and here he is griping. And Maxwell was on his wacky side. Wacky side. Yeah, it's funny.
As a field. There's nothing there to count. Let me count the parts of the field. You can't. There's nothing there to count. The entire concept of the photon is the entire premise of the photon is an arbitrary concept created by Leonard Troland.
Okay, so again, he says the photon is an arbitrary concept. Again, the idea of light being a corpuscle. Newton said that. There's nothing arbitrary about it. There's nothing, it came from nowhere. It was some sort of irrational perception. No, it was a very logical deduction that happened over hundreds of years. And it's just silly. He's saying the idea of a photon is because of the guy who came up with the word photon, rather than light corpuscle.
That job, who was involved in psychical research and telepathy research at Harvard. He died falling off a cliff while mountaineering. Must not have been too damn smart. And then Gilbert Ed Lewis, who then, a hardcore atomist himself, did a condensation of what was later adopted. See, all this started in 1926, and if you actually follow the flowchart of all these scholarly papers that use the word photon, it goes like this for about 40 years, and then it peaks right at the epoch of materialism, making a huge resurgence in America right around 1970. It goes flat.
That's also just complete bullshit. I mean, I got videos from 1950 with, the word photon all over them. In the title, photon. I mean, it's just complete nonsense. Ether was the thing that's been dead for a very long time, and we can see that coming back in around 2000. The little ether nuts coming out of the woods. All of a sudden with 9/11 and Tesla, somehow, the universe went on a wacky, everybody gets stupid train.
Line dead. Everybody's like photon BS for 40 plus years, and then around 1970, somewhere in there, it goes like up like this, and it's just off the scale.
Again, so just completely nonsense. It has nothing to do with reality. It was a really popular word in the 50s. Really popular. Everybody loved it.
Photons. Everybody goes, photons. There's no such thing as a freaking photon. It's a concept. Particle duality. Duality means that Mother Nature is a contradictory witch, because nature has no duality.
Right. So again, he's arguing particle theory by arguing the fact that there's particle wave duality. So yes, you can't, he's having it both ways. No, it's not the particle part that's broken. It's the wave part that's broken. It's this silly notion that there's this ether medium that's, that you can shoot laser beams through the ether medium, or you can shoot big waves through the ether medium, or you can cause all kinds of perturbations in this ether medium. When the simple answer is, no, you can have different particles. You can have photons, you can have electrons, you can shoot nucleuses, you can shoot whole atoms. You can shoot things through the empty space.
Everything is, if not simple, it is utterly simplex. Mother Nature has no cards up her sleeve to show a face card of duality. It's impossible for anything in the universe to be dual. The only thing that is sort of duality is within the minds who cannot wrap their brains around.
So again, he's arguing against particles by arguing against duality. And duality doesn't have anything to do with photons, the invention of the word photons, or the use of the word photons. And the fact that they used it for a lot of time saying that, yes, light's a particle. Now, maybe I won't play it in this video, but we'll see if I have time at the end. I can give you the Feynman clips, so, I mean, for those people who think Feynman's the god, I mean, Feynman was pretty explicit in saying they're corpuscles, they're It's a photon. It's not a wave. It has a property, of doing this wavy thing, but it's definitely a particle when it leaves and when it arrives.
What the hell is going on? And that's fine. You can't call it a duality. It's a duality in your frigging mind, but it's not a duality in reality in Mother Nature. A wave is not a thing. A wave is what something does. This is a wave. Like, no, this is my hand moving. A wave particle duality, my hand. Waving of what? Well, it's electromagnetic waves. Okay,
so again, he's mocking wave theory at the same time he's proposing perturbations through a medium, which is exactly what a wave is. If you want to know a wave in what, well, for an ocean wave, it's a wave in bound atoms that are in tension. They're tied to each other. They're attracted to each other. They're sticking to each other. And that's what it's a wave in, is that tension. Jeez.
What are the electrical magnetic fields comprised of? Well, this will actually is where they'll quantize it again. Well, virtual photons. This is actually what these idiots say and write in their own demented, insane straitjacket articles and books. Virtual photons, you know?
Yes, because it looks exactly like there must be a substance that moves between the two magnets. Alright? It has every appearance of stuff moving in rays, straight line vectors. So, yeah, but they don't have any way to account for its existence. Just like you don't. You don't explain where the energy comes from to push two magnets together. What motivates the little bits inside of the two magnets to move. You don't have an explanation. Well, they didn't have one either, but they deduced that it behaves exactly as if little particles were being transferred between the two magnets.
Like magnetism, it's virtual photons. Virtual photons. It's just, well, it's no different than saying unicorns and leprechauns. Wave of what? Well, it's a wave of electrical and magnetic, whether circular or linear polarization.
Right, so we all do funny voices, and again, you're just Henry Pottering. You're just, using your magic. It's a perturbation! Yeah.
You idiots! Not you people. These idiots.
You idiot.
These people are morons. You see, mathematicians only believe. They only believe.
And maybe they're also cowards like you. I mean, you're all cowards. You all won't defend your rubbish against anybody challenging it. You just sit there, being pussy. I'll take on anybody. Anyone of Ken's supporters. You want to make an argument? Yeah, I'll do a live room. Make your argument. Show how I'm wrong. Show how Ken's theory has some sort of hope of being the truth. Go ahead. Take your chance at explaining it in some sort of reasonable language. Good fucking luck. But this coward's afraid of that kind of contest. He talks all this big talk, and he shows no courage to defend any of it against anyone.
Because it's impossible to, just toss the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the ether. Doesn't matter whether you call it inertia or counter space or the ether. You can't throw it out, so what they do is they invented a new word to go in its place. Dark matter. Quantum foam. God, there's about a dozen words that they use to refer to the ether without saying the word ether. There's no such thing as a wave particle.
So he thinks there is some ether thing that explains why they invented dark matter, which, again, dark matter is just a mathematical invention. So the very math he says they're doing wrong that necessitates the existence of something called dark matter, he thinks there really is dark matter, it's just ether perturbating. Because it doesn't exist unless it's perturbating. Because it's not a field of ether, it's only a something when it's perturbating.
Duality. It's not a particle. Mother Nature has no dualities, and a wave is not a thing. A wave is what something does. Oh, it's waving. What is waving? Look, there's waves out on the ocean. Waves of what? No waves on the ocean. Waves of what? Waves on the ocean. What are the waves comprised of? Well,
so perturbation is an okay word. We don't have to say perturbations in what. Perturbations in what? How does it perturbate? What is it perturbating in? How does the perturbator work? What are you talking about? We know what an ocean's made out of. What's perturbation field made out of? The field of perturbatia.
Waves other than waves of water. A wave is not a principle. It is not a subject. It is not a noun. Not demonstrably, not denotatively a noun. It is connotatively a noun in a dictionary, but a wave is not a thing. A wave is what a thing does. So there's no such thing as a wave-particle duality. The very premise is contradictory.
Well, you could say a mountain isn't a thing, okay, because it's really just dirt. It's a pile of dirt. There's no such thing as a mountain. But we know that, yes, dirt in a certain configuration is a thing, and matter in a certain configuration is in the form of wave. Yes, it's also a verb, but it's clearly a noun. It's an identifiable object. I mean, mountain is theoretically a verb, being mountained. Okay, but, you know, you wouldn't call a mountain, you wouldn't say it's not a legitimate word identifying a legitimate thing.
If someone has 5 brain cells and knows how to apply Platonic logic to stupid people's ideas like these mathematical, knuckle-dragging atomists who want to quantize everything.
Again, I don't know atomists. So again, what is his theory of, you know, structure if he's not an atomist?
If you think that means something, then you're not too smart yourself. Sir, I have a PhD on the wall, and some papers are peer-reviewed. If you knew what peer-reviewed meant, you would never use those words because it doesn't mean anything. Thank you so much.
Obviously, you're not being reviewed by somebody who has any kind of credentials because they're not getting paid any kind of money. They're getting paid like $10 an hour to go, well, I think that's good physics. I think so. I'll pass it on to Smarty Guy. And they know that Smarty Guy gets really pissed off if you hand off to him something that's not right. But the imbecile doesn't know the difference. So he's just going, well, this is from Professor Smarty Perpedadia. So, yeah, that must be a good theory because his name is long. He's Professor, so his stuff must be right. That's all. Yeah, reviewing is nonsense. There's no accountability. They're cloistered and hidden from view. You don't even get to know. You don't know who's challenging you. Bozo the Clown, you know, Gumby, Pokey. You get nothing from these fucks.
Watching, if you like these videos, always click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Either way, I'm right. Tell me I'm arrogant. Actually, I don't care if you think I'm arrogant. Tell me I'm wrong. You can go ahead and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm...
Yeah, but I'm right. Well, when I prove you wrong, will you do whatever I say? Like, will you jump off a cliff or jump off a pier or do all that kind of crap or whatever? I mean, what's your penalty for being such an obnoxious, arrogant slob when I'm going to prove you wrong?
I'm not wrong because you can't prove me wrong. No branch of science has ever defined a field.
The evidence proves you wrong. And you can't point to any evidence. Your whole theory contains absolutely no evidence. Nothing. Not a single piece of evidence demonstrating anything. Not an experiment, nothing.
Field, and a field is not a quantity. This is the birth of quantum physics, the study of fields and particles, but fields cannot be quantized, and they certainly the hell are not particles. Nor is there any...
Yes, well, they are in fact. If something's fielding, it's likely you're noticing the field because it actually is particling. That's exactly what it's doing. Exactly.
Any such nonsense as a wave-particle duality. Nor is there any such nonsense as a lot particle.
Yes, I agree. There's no duality. Yes, it's particles.
A photon.
There's no such thing as a perturbation in a coaxial cable. Coaxial cable. Counter space. There, I won, right? I just won the argument by doing a mocking laugh.
Oh my god, how stupid people are. Humanity has not evolved enough yet to understand what light is. It's really, really simple.
Yes, all that mush you said is really, really simple. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, baby talk is really simple, but yeah, there's nothing in it, you know. And there's nothing in this rubbish you're talking, this shit you're talking. Nothing. Alright, so another one. Yeah, sorry. I'll try to buzz through this one a little quicker.
Field theory, great. Best field theory. A lot of people that actually
more volume,
watching
please.
videos like, what's this guy doing field theory videos all this time? Like, I've done like well over 1,000 of them over the past several years.
Yes, and as stated, very depressing.
To me. I always try to find
118 likes
to
to
explain
10
things
dislikes, and that's a
could
trend.
understand.
10
like,
to 1.
People think that actually something is occurring between two magnets. Now, of course, it's incorrect to refer to magnetic attraction, because there's no such thing. Magnetism is by definition force in motion. But regardless,
it's by definition force in motion. You know, and the force in motion doesn't have something to do with attraction and repulsion as being the output of the force in motion. But there's no attraction and there's no repulsion and there's nothing communicated between the magnets in his theory.
But the common layman's conception of seeing magnetic attraction, quote unquote, or magnetic repulsion, they think that actually something is going on between those two magnets, and there is nothing going on between them. Well, sure there is.
Well, he says, yes, see, it's just such nonsense. He says nothing going on, and then he'll say pressure mediation. Pressure from what? Something's going on then if there's pressure mediating. But again, that simple notion of some sort of pressure pushing them together or pressure pulling them apart, he has to make it somehow, he has to explain the charge difference, which he doesn't do. How does it know to be attracted or repelled?
What sort of insane statement is that? No, nothing is occurring. If we were actually to place a vacuum between the two magnets and eliminate absolutely every bit of particle, of course we can't create a complete vacuum.
Every bit of particle, well, you're obviously not going to be eliminating the particles like photons. You can't vacuum photons out of a box. There's no vacuuming photons out of a box, so show me where you can, show me you vacuuming photons out of something.
You know, there's nothing occurring anymore between those two.
Show me you vacuuming radio waves out. Show me you vacuuming even alpha particles out. Let me see you vacuum something small, transparent.
Magnets, and is recurring between two bodies as they actually orbit each other. Nothing is occurring between two magnets. Now, here's a simple question.
I mean,
we
I
have
don't
this
know how he gets away with
daily
saying something so
that,
fucking stupid. I mean, nothing is occurring between two magnets. It's just, what sense does it make? I mean, it's insanely it can't be the right answer. There's clearly something happening between the two magnets. It's just idiotic. Obviously, something is communicating between them in some way that they know they have to change their behavior. I mean, it's quite obvious something is happening. They don't just have, oh, I guess he says they have ESP. You know, they just, I just know it.
You know, a person casts a shadow, right? I mean, the sun's at 10 o'clock on the horizon, you're casting a shadow on the sidewalk. Shadow is not a property of the person that is casting it. Rather, the nature of the person as relational to the field, in this case it would be the longitudinal field perturbation that we call electromagnetic radiation, which is technically a coaxial circuit. Let's just say light, right?
Right, so coaxial circuits, you're somehow blocking the coaxial circuits, you're breaking them, and so you cast a shadow. Now, yeah, who's arguing with that? But then you start to go with this nonsense that somehow we don't know that that's a real effect. Blocking coaxial cables actually causes an effect. Of course it does. But you're pretending there is no such thing in the rest of your dogma.
Light's pouring down on somebody. Of course, light doesn't move. Once again, I mean, it is a field perturbation, but that's a matter for another discussion.
Right, so light doesn't move. It's a field perturbation, which he usually calls a longitudinal field perturbation. Like a coaxial cable, it goes somewhere. Coaxial cables don't just sit at the cable company and go, I'm not going anywhere. So again, I mean, one page of his Bible completely contradicts the next page of his Bible. I mean, they're completely different stories. One minute it doesn't move, the next minute it's a cable reaching across billions of light years of space. How did it get across billions of light years of space? I mean, so I guess he doesn't say it doesn't move because he actually thinks light is instantaneous. He actually thinks there isn't a speed of light. And that's been proven so many times. I mean, so what do you believe, you crazy fuck? I mean, again, he just implies somehow there's faster than light communication, and yet, where's the evidence of it? Well, everybody would take advantage of it if there was any such thing. It has to move to get from one place to another. How can you say it doesn't move? It's retarded.
And use Platonic retroductive logic and to actually think about what the hell is going on between two magnets. There's nothing actually going on between those two magnets. The only thing that actually defines a magnet, and I don't know why you won't read this in any book anywhere on magnetism or what the hell magnetism is, because science has never defined a field, and it has absolutely no idea what's going on between two magnets. If you disagree with me, you're a liar, or you...
Well, whatever. Yes, their theories aren't very complete. And I argue that I don't know why people have accepted the conventional theory, because it is so incomplete, and why they haven't demanded that, well, physics should be able to do better than that. Virtual photon, yeah, they should be able to do better than that. But again, that doesn't make you right.
Pass that by. Back to our shadow analogy. Shadow is not a property of the person. A shadow is a privation of light. So when we speak of a shadow, what we're talking about is the privation or absence of the longitudinal field perturbation that we call light, right? A person, of course, everything is capacitance, resistance, permeability, permittivity. The light that's cast upon the...
Again, this whole idea that there's some sort of capacitance, which is storage, and permittivity, which again is just another word for resistance. So he says resistance, but permittivity is exactly the same thing as arguing either you can either push stuff through it or you can't, how easily stuff moves through something. Permittivity is just the opposite of that. So what's the difference? You know, I mean, it's three words saying exactly the same thing: storage and resistance. So you can argue, well, if you really bent it, you could say storage and pressure. Maybe resistance would be pressure. I don't know, but that's a leap.
Field coherency, which is point source. We think of laser light as coherent light, but it is actually point source light, and this actually takes an extremely long time to actually get into in defining the difference.
Well, again, that's not even point source. Actually means something that comes from one place and can radiate in all directions. So that's not even saying anything. Say point source light. The point is the light is in parallel. You know, that might be the word you're looking for. You know, instead of being radiant, it's confined and collated into a narrower beam.
Difference.
All the cables go out straight instead of diverging.
It's the real quantitative difference between coherency and point source light, but that would take a really long time. But I mean, the only thing that actually defines a magnet is field coherency. In attraction, or what we ignorantly call dielectric acceleration, or what the common human being calls magnetic attraction, there is hyperboloidal, actually an hourglass shape, a hyperboloidal field acceleration to a net logic. To understanding that instantaneous action at a distance or non-contact action at a distance, we can say, even if these magnets are in a complete vacuum, which we can't really achieve a complete vacuum, there's not even a complete vacuum in space, nothing is occurring between these two magnets. They're not touching each other, they're not talking to each other.
So again, he just doesn't believe that you could knock something off of something. You know, you could vibrate it. And we could imagine that when you vibrate something, little particles will fly off like dust. And that in even smaller physics, you might understand that if you took a bunch of atoms and you inject them with heat, that bits of them will fly off. Oh, too bold, too weird, too strange. Nature can't possibly work that way.
They're not communicating back and forth about which direction to move, right? I mean, obviously this is an absurd thought. Nothing is actually occurring.
So again, it doesn't make any sense. Nothing is actually occurring except the two magnets are really attracting or really repelling. Page 2 says that. Page 1 says nothing's really happening. Page 2 says all kinds of shit is happening, actually. I mean, it's just idiotic.
The nature of the qualitative field coherency or field incommensurability that defines each one of these magnets has set up a field pressure not only localized to each magnet, but also a pressure geometry. In this case, it would be counter-Cartesian or non-Cartesian acceleration towards counter space. The elimination.
Yes, whatever. Acceleration towards counter space and all that mush is so much better than wave-photon duality. No, I think wave-photon duality makes a hell of a lot more sense than that crap. Whatever that crap even was. So somehow the ether tells the magnet you're a magnet. I've declared you're a magnet, and I've declared you're a magnet. I am the ether. I say so. I will now create pressure around you and make you perturbate and stuff, because I am the ether and I control you. That's. Are you getting something else out of this? Because that's what I'm getting out of this. The magnets don't have properties that are being conveyed to each other, in the sense that the magnet is radiating I'm a fucking magnet, and the other magnet's radiating I'm a fucking magnet, and therefore the magnets are going to behave in a certain way, and it's going to be kind of male and female. Yeah. Girls and boys attract, and girls repel, and boys repel.
Exactly like this. Analogously, don't be too direct with me. But there's nothing that is occurring between the two magnets.
Oh, he doesn't have to be accountable for what he says. Don't be too direct with me. That what he's saying there basically is, don't take what I say literally. And certainly don't quote me after I'm dead. Please, don't do that. Don't take a bunch of my crappy, stupid sayings, and after I'm dead, read them in videos and mock me in a fat man accent. I am Blubbertosa, and I'm blah 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 blah. I mean, you know, you're such an obnoxious cunt. You'll mock the dead, but you don't want to be mocked when you're dead. Hypocrisy, that's called.
By 1 inch neodymium ion boron in 50 Gauss, you can feel it, but nothing's actually occurring between that magnet and the Earth's magnetosphere, or between
so
two
as
other
typical
magnets.
with all Ken's videos, he just keeps saying the same shit over and over in a slightly different, you know, using a slightly different spell. You know, counterspacia, no goya. You know, little slightly different spell, but same fucking wandy motion.
The only thing that defines a magnet, as I said, is field coherence, your field incommensurability. This means that the region or area, in which case we're talking about the ether, inertia, counter space, within that area, the magnet has set up a pressure mediation which acts...
Right, so the ether, counter space, blah blah blah, it decided they're magnets. I shall make the counter spacey effect that's now perturbating. So the ether causes the effect. It's not the magnets having properties. No, the ether did it.
Upon another pressure mediation, whether you call that magnetic attraction or magnetic repulsion. Of course, there's no such thing as magnetic attraction, as I said. It's dielectric acceleration or increasing inertia, or a move towards non-Cartesian rest.
So again, what does it move towards non-Cartesian rest? Whatever the fuck that is. That sounds like bent space, so you must be a big bent space fan. Non-Cartesian rest.
What I come up with is that there's absolutely nothing occurring between those two magnets at all, and a shadow is not a property of the person that has cast it. The person has set up a change in the pressure, permeability, permittivity. We need to say pressure.
Right. So it's changed. It's created a real change in the field around the ground the shadow is being cast on. The ground has something in the field that's causing a change in the atmosphere around it. The heat doesn't get to it. The light doesn't get to it. It's a change. And I mean, again, he's just claiming that somehow that change isn't a real event that just transferred from one area of space to another area of space. That the actual photons are not getting actually blocked. Yeah, they are.
However, it's not pressure. It's actually, of course, the light is being absorbed by the person and casting the shadow. But let's not take the analogy too far. That the person is setting up a case in which the field in which that person is, just like the magnet is always in a field. That field, of course, is the inertia and the counter space and the ether that surrounds it.
Right, right. And somehow the magnet creates these special kinds of fields that somehow know that these fields are going to cause attraction and repulsion, but you have no mechanism. Unlike my theory, where, yes, I give you a polarized mechanism. I give you an explanation for why there's a difference between turning the magnet this way and that way. Because not only is if you're going to claim there's an ether, know what you need to do? You need to give the ether sex. You need to make girl ether and boy ether. Black ether, white ether, square ether, round ether. And then you might have some hope. But no, one ether ain't going to explain magnets and gravity. That ain't going to happen, jackass.
Nothing is communicating or occurring between those two magnets.
Say it
There's
again.
nothing there. If we were to place those two magnets in a complete vacuum, if we could get a complete vacuum, we would observe the exact same acceleration or force and motion.
So he thinks that because something doesn't touch something else, that therefore there can't be communication. So again, he's just so, even his frickin' coaxial cables, why wouldn't they be in between the two magnets? Where are the cables? Why couldn't they be doing it? Why couldn't it be invisible, you know, photons? Photons without a frequency.
As they push apart from each other.
Perturbations.
Too technical. But that doesn't mean that anything is occurring between those two magnets. Those magnets are not reaching out and communicating. That's an absurdity. What's occurring is...
So he's claiming again there's no force. So in gravity there's no force. There's no actual mechanism. The pressure is somehow made out of nothing. Counter space, in space, out space, up space, down space. I mean, this is just quirky stuff. I mean, there's no explanation. Either there is stuff and it's actually creating a pressure, or there isn't stuff and it's not creating a pressure. But non-stuff affecting non-stuff with non-pressure, there's nothing here. You can't make sense out of this shit.
It's the actual field that is everywhere and nowhere, non-Cartesian, has a pressure mediation surrounding the arena that is enveloping that particular region, surrounding each coherent field device, that being the magnet. What is occurring is interactions between those field pressure mediations.
Yes, well, okay, so, but still, the magnet has to communicate it to the field, and then the field communicates it to the other magnet. I mean, to say nothing's going on between the two magnets, well, of course, the field perturbating messages is something going on, isn't it? How can you say nothing is happening when you're exactly saying the opposite? When you start talking about what the field is doing. The field's nothing?
Are enveloping each one of those magnets, but the magnets themselves are not interacting. However, from the superficial level of human conception and ideation with our pathetic limited senses and our even more pathetic intellects, we think that something is occurring between two magnets. But that's an absurdity. Using logic and understanding what the hell is going on, for lack of a better, much more complex denotation in referring to, you know, let's analyze this, how it really is. No, nothing is occurring between these two magnets.
Just amazing. When it has every evidence of something occurring. So it's just, like I said, it's just such upside down logic. Up your ass logic.
It's amazing how something so simplex could actually be so difficult to explain. Some people will get it, other people will just scoff and say, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But, oh girlfriend, I absolutely do. I can sit here and talk about this topic and go far deeper down the rabbit hole.
Right, but you're afraid to do it with anybody else who would say, wait a minute, Ken, I don't get that. Could you just do that again? What? Perturbating through the non-field of the counter space of the hyperboloided, magnitude or unmagnitude?
For hours! But then everybody would start to snooze and,
No, everybody'd like to see you not be a complete coward.
Could make like 20 videos an hour long on this topic alone. Go deeper down the rabbit hole, but no one wants to go that deep.
In America.
Sure I do. No, you don't. You just say that, but you don't really mean it. No one cares.
Yes, obviously no one cares about the fucking truth. They'll just let wankers like you wank in their face, and they'll say, oh, thank you, do that again, please.
Cares about this sort of crap. No, they don't. Well, a few people do, but not many. Thanks so much for watching. Lux Everetas.
Oh, whatever. Fuck you. Fuck you. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, I'll do the Feynman things quickly here. Hopefully quickly. Hopefully quickly.
Ways don't operate this thing. By the way, when you turn the light on, this might go off at any moment. You don't have to wait for a certain length of time. Of course, there's odds that it goes off at any instant, but it could accidentally go off the moment you open the slit. So it's not a question of waiting for the energy of the wave to pile up or anything. It's hopeless. I have to start with light as particles. Waves explain many things, but not light. It's particles, okay? Okay. It's photons. The problem is they're reflected with probability. Now the next feature, having to do with reflection again, that I would like to describe is something that you're also familiar with, perhaps not so directly, but perhaps you've seen the colors in soap bubbles. It's made out of soap water.
So anyway, he said it there. I don't know if you can hear this because unfortunately the volume isn't what it needs to be.
You take oil,
But
which is
can't
sort
do
of a
much
yellow
about it
fluid,
now, so
and
we'll
this
just
is
do the
black.
other clip. I hope it's the other clip. Looks like the same one.
Now what happens when we have a device like this and we put it in the dark is it goes click, 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 click. Every once in a while, a light particle comes in, a photon. This is a particle in every sense. The experiments have all the light properties as follows. That if you have a very weak light, and you have one or two, there's one of them every once in a while, if you put two cells out, and there's just a few of them coming, and it goes on one or the other. They don't go off together. They go off together, you got too many coming, you can't resolve it. But if it's very weak, the particle is either here or there. And it comes in particle. I don't know how much I can emphasize this, especially to young students who have learned its waves. It is particles in every way whenever you can detect it. It's unfortunate for us that we can see the light. I mean, it's unfortunate for us. No, not quite. Now if we were 10 times more sensitive to light, then in the dark, we would see that what we're seeing is little flashes, little tiny dips, dots of light. The nerve would go off, just like the photo multiplier, in spots. But the human eye is not quite that sensitive and takes 5 or 6 of these particles, photons, 5 or 6 photons to make one nerve fiber go off. So it isn't, so we can't.
Yes. So again, there's lots of ways the experiments are done, and there's lots of logic that goes behind them. I mean, but there is a fundamental problem, and the only way you can measure a photon is by actually measuring the movement of an electron. And that's it. There's really no other way to interact with a photon than to see the effect it has, and the smallest effect it can have is moving an electron. So in that sense it has to be a little bit clumpy, but clearly what's being argued is that it's always a certain amount of movement. It's not like it moves the electron this much and the next time it moves it this much and it moves it this, there's not a bunch of variability in how much energy is transferred, and the only vary it is by changing the frequency of the light, which again is changing in a sense the amount of energy per unit of time, and that's why it has a different effect. But it's all just clumps. There's not like half of a photon or quarter of a photon or 1.3 photons or 1.7 photons. Anyway, yeah, so that's enough. So hopefully this will be publishably acceptable. I invested a bit of time in it. I'm hoping it's publishable. Anyway, so till next time and such.